Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com and the Big Four Accounting Firms YouTube channel. Before we get started, just wanted to remind everybody to support us if you have a chance or if you can. Even $1 helps, and we have a link in the description to a website called Buy Me a Coffee. It's just a way to donate to us and support us. Again, any amount is helpful so that we can keep putting out content. And there's also other ways for you to support us in the show notes to this podcast or on YouTube in the description. In today's podcast, I wanted to speak a little bit more about KPMG's layoffs and talk a little bit more about what happened. It's been reported that KPMG is offering severance to some employees, and people are saying that some people have to sign an NDA or a release. I guess for some people you can get a bonus if you sign an NDA, but I don't really understand the point of that. If that's even true, because KPMG has already gone public with this. And even if they do offer a bonus for that, I still wouldn't sign it, just because in case you want to do something in the future with regards to retaining a lawyer or anything, it's just going to restrict that. I mean, not that even if you did retain a lawyer, they'd be able to do anything, because of the contracts of the Big Four are really restrictive on what you can do. You'd most likely have to go through arbitration before you did anything. But I just wouldn't sign it. I don't think those things are worth it. And, it can, if you are outraged about what happened and you got laid off, you probably should go speak to somebody about it. I mean, you can send us an email and tell us what happened too. But it's worth more to be able to do that than to get restricted. And they're probably not even going to give away that much money. It sounds like their severance isn't that much. It's just a few weeks, depending on your years of service. It's not even worth it. I mean, a normal organization, like if you work in a large company and industry, would offer you more severance than what the Big Four offer. The Big Four just aren't good with this type of stuff. And I saw something about an enhanced separation package, including access to Cobra at the employee rate for up to 18 months if you elect to sign a release agreement. But the thing is, there's no access to Cobra. If you employ more than 20 people in the previous year, you have to provide your employees with Cobra. That's not access to Cobra. And that's what I'm saying. They might be trying to sugarcoat some stuff to get people to sign some documents on their way out. I just wouldn't do it. If you are separating from the firm and you don't have anything lined up right away, and you don't plan to get a job for a little bit, you probably should get into Cobra. For those of you that don't know, Cobra just allows you to continue your healthcare services. The only problem is you have to pay a large amount compared to what you used to pay. It'll probably, in the US, since this is in the US, it'll probably be around $500 or $600. Depending on your level, you'd pay less if you had a high deductible. But that's mandatory. They're not doing that because out of the kindness of their heart. So if you see that anywhere that they're offering you Cobra, they're not offering you that. It's mandatory that they have to offer you Cobra if they have more than 20 employees. So I also wanted to talk about why they did this now, because the timing is a little bit confusing to me. It's my speculation that one of the reasons they were doing this was because of their fiscal year end just happened. But even then, it's still confusing, because they should have done this earlier. They should have done this when the Big Four were all laying people off, like when Deloitte was laying people off, and KPMG around the world has laid people off. So I don't know why the US didn't do it earlier. And it might have been something to do with Lynn Doty, because Lynn Doty was the CEO of the US until July, when she handed over the keys. And we had a podcast about that changing of leadership. So I think that's had something to do with it. I think this is a bad start for their new CEO. And their new CEO's name is Paul Knopp. And that's another reason that the timing doesn't make sense, because Paul Knopp just started his job. He just started being the US CEO of KPMG. And this is a really bad start out to his leadership position. So that's another reason I think the timing is weird. And I think there was probably a partner revolt is what I'm thinking happened, because if they just had their fiscal year end, they probably determined their partner bonuses and the partners didn't like it. And they decided that they needed to lay people off so that they can get bonuses. Because the timing doesn't really make sense otherwise. Right at their fiscal year end, right at the beginning of this guy's term, and it seems like the partners just weren't satisfied with their compensation because otherwise the timing really doesn't make sense. And then another reason why they might have done this right now is because a lot of companies around the globe laid people off like in the past few days. So this might have been some kind of coordination between all of those companies. I know Disney laid off 20 something thousand employees. Goldman Sachs laid off a lot of employees recently. Airlines are going to lay people off if there's not a new stimulus plan. Shell, the oil company, laid off 7,000 to 9,000 jobs. So there's a lot of job cuts that are happening right now, especially in the U.S. because there's been no stimulus plan. So there's been there was a first stimulus, but there hasn't been a second one passed just yet. It might pass if you're listening to this a few days from now. So I think that's another reason they wanted to slip it in while these companies are laying people off. But all the other signs of the economy are, it's not the best, but it's improving. So that's another reason why I say it's kind of weird they did the timing now. But that could signal, the economy getting better because KPMG being the last one to do huge layoffs in the US could signal that there's better times ahead. The good thing about this, though, is that KPMG actually reached out to news organizations, Business Insider, to release this. But I think the reason they did that is because they realized employees were going to talk about it anyway. But at least they said something about it. Like other Big Four accounting firms like E&Y, they've been doing stuff stealthily, letting people go because of performance. And I think PwC has been doing similar things. And PwC says they're going to stop fall recruiting. So the other firms are kind of keeping it quiet what they're doing, and it's good at least that KPMG released this. And I've heard some rumors that the KPMG is going to do more in October, so there's going to be probably a second round of this. And a lot of what KPMG is doing here is letting go of EAs, which is administrative assistants. That makes sense to me because if the partners aren't in the office, then there's not a reason to have a lot of administrative assistants. And there's been a move over the years against administrative assistants and outsourcing their tasks to India and other countries. So that doesn't surprise me either. And there'll be more to come there if there's still enough EAs left over. So that's something else of note. But I think what this goes to show is that the economy appears to be getting somewhat better, but nobody knows what's going to happen. And also, the Big Four accounting firms, and not only the Big Four accounting firms, large corporations during tough times like this like to take away employees' rights and chip away at employees' pay, which they've done here. They've done pay cuts. And I think that's why KPMG got this in while they could, because you want to do this during a bad time. You don't want to lay people off during good times. I'm sure their year end is not going to be as bad as we think it's going to be because of this. The Big Four accounting firms in the last downturn, they did the same thing. They cut pay and they got rid of people for performance reasons. So it doesn't surprise me that they're doing that again during another downturn. Most corporations will do that. And some people say, well, they're companies and they only look out for profit. And I agree with you, right? But that's giving the Big Four accounting firms too much credit, because the Big Four accounting firms go in the press all the time and they virtue signal about everything they're doing. They're giving back to their communities. They care about this type of people. They try and help these people. They're trying to hire more people in a certain demographic, but then they just lay off a bunch of people. Or they're investing in this type of technology. They're investing in that type of technology. Well, why don't they just invest in their people and hire less people in the coming years? Well, the reason they're doing that, the reason they're laying people off, is because they're trying to get rid of more expensive salaries, and they're going to keep hiring people. They're just going to keep hiring younger people so that the salaries of those younger people will be lower, and the partners can still get their bonuses. So that's why I don't give the Big Four as much leeway as some other people do. I agree that they're profit-minded, but the way they go about it could be better, in my opinion. Especially right now, especially right now. But for the people out there that are worried, you don't need to worry because, like I said, the economy is doing better. There's companies that are gaining tons of ground, technology companies that are growing, and the capital markets are doing well. Companies are raising a lot of money. What that means is there needs to be more accountants. So if you do lose your job from KPMG, unless you're in consulting, right? Because consulting is going to struggle no matter what it is, unless you have technology experience, and then you can get plenty of jobs anywhere. But consulting is struggling because even Accenture laid off, I think, 25,000 people. But if you're an accountant, you can go into industry and get a job because there's so many companies in the capital markets raising money, going public. There's going to be accountants needed in those jobs. And alternatively, if you don't get those jobs and you have the right skills, you can be a consultant yourself or a contractor because big four accounting firms usually have high rates above $200 or $300 for their staff. Even though they might discount it, it's still going to be expensive. And if you offer a high skill set for less money on LinkedIn, keep your LinkedIn up to date and offer contracting services, there's firms out there looking for contractors to do accounting work because they realize how the big four are and they charge too much. The big four charges $200 or $300 an hour for basic work. If you're willing to come in at $50 an hour, $60 an hour, then you can get a job. So I think there's a reason for people to be concerned about a big four accounting job right now. But I don't think there's a reason for people to be concerned about an accounting job overall because there's so much opportunity right now. Maybe not in certain industries, like the industries we talked about, laying people off. Like energy is also struggling. This is one of the worst times in energy. But technology, finance companies are always complex and are always being regulated more. There's more regulation. Even government jobs, you can go into those because there's so much governmental overreach right now that governments have a lot of departments. They're growing their departments, and people need to keep eyes on those budgets, and they need to plan their budget for their next year and how they're going to collect their taxes. There's plenty of accounting jobs out there. If you lose your job at the big four accounting firms, you can look to those jobs or be a contractor. So that's the update for today. To stay up to date on all the big four accounting firms news, make sure to subscribe to this podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and support us financially through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes if you can. Thanks for listening.